In this video, we're going to learn a couple new factoring strategies. So far, if there were three terms, the first term was always x squared or y squared or b squared, whatever, but there was never a coefficient here. And so you could always just split it up into x and x or y and y or b and b. But you can't do that in this case because of that 2. So now to get a 2x squared, one of the first terms has to be 2x and x. So I have to split it up like that. I guess I could put the 2 in front of the second set of parentheses here, but one of them has to be a 2x. And so now when you're looking for two numbers that multiply to be 6 and add up to be 7, it actually doesn't work because the two numbers that do that are 6 and 1. But if I set up 6 and 1, and they're both positive, this doesn't equal 2x squared plus 7x plus 6. First times first is 2x squared, but outer is 2x and inner is 6x, and that does not add up to be 7x. It adds up to be 8x. And so this is not the right way to factor this problem. That 2 changes it. So the way that your book teaches this is to just do guess and check. Okay, so 6 and 1 didn't work. What if I put the 6 here and the 1 here? What if I flipped them around? Does that make a difference? Well, if I do first times first, I still get 2x squared, but outer is 12x and inner is 1x. So that also does not add up to be 7x. That adds up to be 13x. So 6 and 1 don't work at all. What other numbers do you know that multiply to be 6? And we'll try to get them to add up to be 7, but that add up to be 6 or multiply to be 6. Well, 3 and 2. So let's think about it. If I do, if I do 2 and then 3, I get first times first is still 2x squared, but outer is 2 times 3, which is 6. Inner is 2 times x, which is x. So that still does not add up to be 7. So what if I put the 3 here and the 2 here? Multiply to be 6. So, let's figure it out. First times first is 2x squared. Outer is 2x times 2, which is 4x. Inner is 3 times x, which is 3x. And then 2 times 3 is 6. So I've finally come up with the answer. So the answer is 2x plus 3 and x plus 2. But it's taken me, check how long this video is so far. It's taken me a while to get to that. I don't necessarily like guessing and checking. I like to being able to have a systematic approach or a method to use. And so that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to redo this problem, 2x squared plus 7x plus 6. But I'm going to do something that we don't normally do. I'm going to uncombine like terms. Because right now I have 3 terms. If I have 4 terms, then I can use grouping. And I like grouping because I've got a method to my madness. So I'm going to uncombine like terms. And I'm going to write 7x as 4x plus 3x. So I've not changed the value of anything. I've just split 7x apart. So I'm going to bring down the rest of the problem. 2x squared plus 4x plus 3x plus 6. And now that I have 4 terms, I do my factoring by grouping. So I factor out what the first 2 terms have in common, which is a 2x, and in parentheses I'm left with x plus 2. And then I look for the GCF of the second 2 terms, which is 3. And then I'm left in parentheses with an x plus 2. So then my final answer is x plus 2 times 2x plus 3. So it's the same answer. I just used a different approach, but I still got the same answer. And so you might have the question, or you might be wondering, is this the only way that I could have split up 7x? And the answer is yes. And so we're going to use something called the AC method to decide how to split up the middle term. Because if I had made this, what other 2 numbers multiply to be, or add to be 7, 2 and 5, then I wouldn't have been able to do factoring by grouping. And so here's the AC method. So we're going to do a new problem here. So number 2 says 4x squared plus 7x plus 3. And so I want to know, or I want to use the AC method. So I'm going to label some things. I'm going to let this first coefficient in front of the x squared term be a, and the coefficient in front of the x term b, and the constant c. So I'm going to off to the side take a times c, which in this case is taking 4 times 3, which is 12. And so I'm not going to look for two numbers that multiply to be 3 and add up to be 7 because those don't exist. I'm going to look for two numbers that multiply to be 12 and add to be 7. So two numbers that multiply to be 12 and add up to be 7. And so it's not 1 and 12, it's not 2 and 6, it is 3 and 4. And so you can choose to put them in either order. There's a little bit of strategy as to why I'm going to put the 4x first, just so then that way it matches with the 4. But you could do it in either order and you'd get the same thing. So I'm going to bring down the rest of the problem. 4x squared plus 4x plus 3x plus 3. And then I'm going to do factoring by grouping. So the first two terms have a 4x in common, so I'm left with x plus 1. And then the second two terms have a 3 in common, so I'm left with, again, x plus 1. And so my final answer is x plus 1 times 4x plus 3. And so just instead of having to say, do I put the 4x here and then the x, and then, how do I split up the 3? Instead of having all that guessing and checking, I have to figure out the two numbers that multiply to be AC and add up to be B, and that's how I uncombine like terms. So let's do another practice problem here. So if I do, let's see, if I do, I'm going to do this just so we can see how it works. 2x squared minus 7x plus 6. So here's the idea. A is 2, B is a negative 7, C is 6. So if I take A times C, I get 12. But I need two numbers that multiply to be 12 and add up to be negative 7. And the two numbers that multiply to be 12 and add up to be negative 7 are a negative 3 and a negative 4. That's how I have to split up this middle term to be negative 3x minus 4x. And so I bring down the rest of the problem, 2x squared minus 3x minus 4x plus 6. So they have to be negative so that they add up to be a negative 7 in the middle. So 2x squared minus 3x just have an x in common, so I'm left with 2x minus 3. And then negative 4x plus 6, when I factor out what they have in common, also keeping in mind that what I want in parentheses is a positive 2x and then a minus 3, I'm going to factor out a negative 2. So when I divide out a negative 2, I'm left with a positive 2x minus 3. So the two answers are 2x minus 3 and x minus 2. So whenever your A times C number is positive, it could be that both your numbers were positive, or it could be that both your numbers were negative. They're not always 3 and 4, though, and we'll get some practice with that.